The Blocktalk Podcast started because of my passion for the property management industry. I wanted to start a conversation and add some value within the industry with a diverse range of people and professionals who can add something extra. As we start out, my aim is that the podcast offers some useful insight into a variety of views, opinions, thoughts, and foresights from our guests, who include business leaders and industry experts. If you enjoy the podcast and want to find out any other information, head on over to brianwelsh.co.uk. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Blocktalk Podcast. A bit different this week. Today we're speaking to Andy Bright, Action for Pulmonary Fibrosis Corporate Partnerships Coordinator. AFP is our charity of the year, and Andy has personal experience of life as a PF patient, having developed pulmonary fibrosis in his 40s and following a 10-year journey, eventually receiving a life-saving double lung transplant in 2018. Great to have you on, Andy. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Thank you for having me here today.
Brilliant. I'm loving the T-shirt.
Yes, it's my uniform. I worked for insurance for 25 years, and my uniform used to be a suit, collar and tie. These days, it's an Action for Pulmonary Fibrosis T-shirt.
Brilliant, brilliant. I think the suit has gone by the wayside, to be fair. I don't remember the last. In fact, I don't think I own a suit that now fits me, to be honest.
No, I remember I moved to a broker's and I banned ties. This was in the noughties, and it was fiasco. It's like, we can't do that. So times have changed.
No, they have, most definitely. They have done this. Okay, so you're our charity of the year at CPL. Can you tell us a bit about the charity? In fact, I'll tell you what, before that, tell me, what is pulmonary fibrosis? Explain it to me.
Yeah, sure. Pulmonary fibrosis is also called lung scarring.
Right.
It describes a group of interstitial lung diseases where the oxygen, the lungs become progressively smaller and stiffer, and that eventually leads to low oxygen levels in the blood. That means that obviously the oxygen can't get through into the muscles, which means they're tired, people are fatiguing. When I got to end stage in 2018, my gas flow, which is how much oxygen gets through, was 21% what it should have been.
Oh, wow.
Pulmonary fibrosis affects around 70,000 people in the UK. There is currently no cure. The average life expectancy is 3 to 5 years.
Oh, wow.
However, there's a lot of research going on which is leading to improvements in treatment and care. So it's a tough disease. It's a tough disease.
Yeah, it sounds it. So tell me about the charity and how and why it started.
Action for Pulmonary Fibrosis was formed in 2013 by a small and ambitious group of patients and carers. Two leading interstitial lung disease doctors, one of which treated me, and I attribute the work that he did with me as saving my life, and a registered nurse. That's all it was at the time. The result is a charity that puts patients first. We're patient-led, and also their families, because it's, as I mentioned earlier, is everybody who's living with the disease. That would be the patient, loved one, partners, loved ones, children, grandchildren. Everybody's touched by the disease. So that's at the heart of everything we do. This unique connection drives everything that we've achieved already and what we hope to achieve in the future. Obviously, 10 years ago, we talk about times changing. Knowledge of the disease amongst healthcare professionals, it was quite patchy. My GP put it down to what I ate in the early days.
Is that right?
Yeah. I made the mistake of telling her I like the odd curry and a pint, And he said, "Well,
Who doesn't, right?
that's why you're coughing all the time." There were very few specialist doctors or nurses then, and patients only had limited access to pulmonary rehab, which obviously utilizes the oxygen that they have in their body more efficiently. And there was very little research going on into causes or treatments. Again, when I was involved, I say 2008 or thereabouts, there were no effective drug therapies, and only a handful of specialist hospitals. There were also very little support groups, either online or around the country. Couldn't find any printed material or anything online for families that was useful. People, I did, is when you get the information from the doctors, you go on to Dr. Google. And again, as I said earlier on, the first thing that jumps up is you've got 3 to 5 years to live. And that's terrifying.
Yeah. So we touched a wee bit on your story, and I've got some questions I want to ask. But so you went to the doctor. They said it was because of curry and beer, and then kind of what happened after that? Tell us a bit about the story.
I used to describe it. I was misdiagnosed, but having worked for the charity now for 2 years, I've learnt that I was diagnosed with the information that they had at the time. So yes, my doctor said, stop eating what you're eating. But I went for a chest x-ray and it came back, and the GP said there's something on the image that we're a bit concerned about. So I went to the hospital and they told me it wasn't cancer, which of course was good news then. But you learn after a while that the disease I had kills more people than leukemia. So a year. So then it started a long journey of these diagnoses. I was sent for what's called a VATS biopsy, which is a video-assisted thoracoscopic surgery. And basically they put a camera in through your side and a couple of other implements, and they take a piece of the lung and analyze it. And that led to 2 different diagnoses over the following couple of years. Eventually I got to 2012, and the consultants at the hospital said, your lung disease, your lung functions are declining, but there's not much more we can do. We'll see you in 12 months' time. Well, I have a motto that I've had for many years, which is never give up. That's because I used to play sports, a lot of sports, and I would never give up. And I adopted that in my personal life. So, as I mentioned earlier on, I went to see this doctor, Gisley Jenkins, in Nottingham, and he carried out further tests and came up with a definitive diagnosis. And that was pulmonary fibrosis. And that was when in 2013, we knew that within 3 to 5 years, I would need a lung transplant if I was going to survive.
Okay. What happened after that then?
Well, it got progressively worse, which was inevitable. We tried several things to try and slow down the progression. At the time, there were 2 drugs that were available, but because I didn't have the right sort of pulmonary fibrosis, I wasn't eligible for the drugs. You had to have a specific type of pulmonary fibrosis, which was a bit tough, really, because there were drugs on the market that were available that could potentially slow down the progression of my disease and extend my life, and I didn't qualify, and that's tough. So Gisley said, because of the way that my disease presented, is that there was anecdotal evidence that chemotherapy could slow down the progression of the disease. And I says, well, let's do that. Never give up. Let's try that then. And again, because it was quite controversial and nothing had been proven, we had problems explaining that to the people who were going to carry out the chemotherapy. So that took another 18 months to get sorted. And it was to and fro between Nottingham and Birmingham. Eventually, I had the chemotherapy in 2014. And we believe to that day that extended my life for a couple of years, which got me to the transplant. But after that, 2015, I'd go back and every time I did the lung function tests, it was going down. And that's pretty much what every person who has pulmonary fibrosis is facing. You go back, you're happy if the lung function tests haven't dropped dramatically. But they're inevitably, they're going downwards. So in my case, we kept on top of things. I did the pulmonary rehab. I tried to stay as fit as I could. I'd go to the gym and walk a couple of miles. I'd be on the treadmill, and I'd have my oxygen cylinder on the side of the machine. Again, you get some funny looks. But you have to accept that's what it is. I used to, and I still do say that it was a badge of pride. If anybody asked me what it was all about, I'd tell them. The conversation usually went like, why are you on oxygen? Do you have asthma? And I'd say no. And they say, do you have COPD? And I say no. And they say, do you have lung cancer? And I say no. And I say, I've got pulmonary fibrosis. And 99 times out of 100, they would say, what's that?
Yeah.
And that's tough. So that was 2015. I was on the radar of the lung transplant team at Queen Elizabeth in Birmingham, but it was like everybody patient with pulmonary fibrosis. It was how quickly would I need the transplant, or how quickly will I die? That's the sad reality of it. Mine got worse, and as 2018, I got to end stage really. I'm always been quite a practical person, and I started researching my own death, planning my own funeral. I have this idea of when I've been buried or cremated that I'll have a Wild West coffin. So I contacted a local carpenter, and we were designing my own Wild West coffin. Talking to my best mate about, would he walk my daughter down the aisle when I was gone, because she was getting engaged, and I wouldn't be here to walk her down the aisle. I took my wife out for our wedding anniversary meal in September of 2018 and said this will be our last one. So those are the kind of conversations that people with pulmonary fibrosis need to have. Sadly, some people don't feel they can have them. And that's where the charity comes in, is because it gives them information, either as a parent or as a carer or as a family member. Gives them information as, what can be expected, but also what can be done. I mean, there is hope on the horizon, which is what we're all about, really.
Amazing story. So small charity. What challenges do you guys have to overcome being a smaller charity in the country?
Yeah, well, obviously, we're on the back foot from the very beginning compared to all the well-known charities, because not a lot of people have heard of pulmonary fibrosis. I mean, I always use as an example of my own family. My mother had breast cancer twice and died of heart failure. My father had to have bypass surgery in his 50s, and he died of cancer. My sister-in-law, unfortunately, she lived with multiple sclerosis for many years. So all these all these people, all these diseases have big charities that are well known. My father-in-law had Parkinson's disease. So what we've got is we haven't got the kind of funding that the British Heart Foundation have, Cancer Research have, Macmillan's have to have these big advertising campaigns. So whatever fundraising that we get, we have to make sure that it's spent in the most efficient way we can, really. So we do things like approach the BBC. We had a Lifeline appeal, which went out just before the last World Cup, which was great. It was a 8-9 minute piece that was on the BBC. We raised quite a bit of money from it, but it was also about raising awareness, letting people know that disease is out there, and what we're doing to support the people that are living with the disease, and also what we're doing to help fund research to stop the progression of the disease, ultimately stop the disease and cure it, really. So we don't have the kind of finances that everybody else has, but we do use it most efficiently.
That's good. That's good news. So you are our charity of the year. And how we decide that is we ask our team within CPL to give us suggestions. And then we pick kind of top 3, 4, and then we go out to social media and ask people to kind of vote. And you guys won hands down this year. So there's a fair amount of fundraising going on. We're doing the 3 peaks later in the year. Well, I'm not. 2 of the guys are. We're doing office-to-office walking, which there's a number of the guys already started, but excellent. I did some. I joined it a couple of days ago. I did some this morning as well. So can we talk about? I guess that your role as corporate partnerships coordinator has something to do with kind of getting companies to provide to the charity. How does that work?
Well, obviously we've got lots of people, usually because they have a lived experience of the disease, who do different things, as you say, like the 3 peaks. And I mean, even before the charity, before I started working for the charity, I was doing fundraising myself. So it was like we'd have parties, and any money raised from that would be donated. Since my transplant, I've actually abseiled down the Holt End at Villa Park to raise money for it. And myself and my colleagues we did the Zip World in North Wales last year, which is the longest in Europe, which is just under a mile long and goes up to 100 miles an hour. So that's what people can do that on an individual basis. Obviously, that raises a fantastic amount of money. But what we're looking to do with the corporate partnerships is find people such as yourselves who are prepared to put it out to their staff and become part of our family. Because I always call my pulmonary fibrosis family and my transplant family, and you're now part of that. Because it's so tough. I was touched when I learned that it was one of your colleagues who'd lost a loved one to it. And as you know, having been through it, I can totally understand where they were. So we were over the moon when we got it, and the charity are really excited. My role is to go out and find as many as I can. Companies that have an association with us. I mean, we like to term it as a positive association. So you get something out of it, and we get something out of it. We get, the opportunity to support people, fund research, campaign, and educate. I mean, I referred earlier on to my GP, and that GP isn't standalone. That's a lot of GPs. So working with corporate partners like this, one, we raise important money, but it gives us a wider voice as well. So you and I understand do software for estate agents.
Yeah, property managers, block managers, yeah.
Yeah, that kind of thing. So hopefully that will spread out then to those companies as well. So they become aware. And it's important from our point of view is that we raise awareness to the level of like cancer and the level of heart disease as quickly and as positively as we can.
Good. So all that kind of fundraising, and you touched on this slightly, but I just want to ask you a bit more about it. So what resources do you have for people living with PF, and also supporting them and their families?
It's grown dramatically over the last few years. I mean, when I first was diagnosed, I didn't get any support from anywhere. There was no support groups. There was no printed literature. There was nothing. So I had to rely on Dr. Google. But APF, as I say, over the years, they've progressed. They've added more services to what we can do to support them. For the last 2 years, I've been a regional support coordinator for APF, and that's helping the 70. Well, we have over 70 now support groups around the UK. So they're support groups run by either patients, carers, or healthcare professionals, and they meet on a regular basis where patients and families members can go to, and they share their hopes, their fears, and their aspirations, and they learn more about the disease. So that's the support groups. Directly, we've got a support line that is manned at the moment. It's Monday to Friday, 9 till 5, but hopefully in more time we can extend that. And that's where people have maybe looked at our website, found some information, but they want more clarification. They can phone the support line and speak to somebody there who'll point them in the right direction. Again, with the money that people like yourselves will be raising, we're intending to employ a registered ILD nurse, so someone who has specialist knowledge in the area and will be able to give more pointed advice. We've also got a monthly online carers group, because the carers needs are different to the patients. They have questions that, they may not want to ask their loved one, or they can't ask their loved one because they don't feel it's right. So we have a monthly online carers group there that's run by one of our members of staff who's had lived experience of it. She lost her mother to it, bless her. We also have our pulmonary fibrosis transplant support group. So a transplant is quite daunting operation. Mine lasted 9.5 hours. I was in a coma for 8 days because of complications with the heart and the kidneys. So those kind of things have to be considered as a pulmonary fibrosis patient, as to whether, if you're lucky enough to be considered for it, what questions do you need to ask? So we have this support group, which is made up of pulmonary fibrosis patients and post-transplant patients. So we can share ideas and they can ask questions. We work closely with healthcare professionals because obviously they're at the sharp end of it. We launched an initiative called the One Voice ILD, which is involving respiratory specialists from all around the UK, getting them together and discussing different things. I mean, our priorities at the moment are obviously to raise awareness, but we've been working with trying to raise awareness with parliamentarians. I know they've got a lot on their plate at the moment, but we need to raise that with them to support on our mission. The One Voice ILD will gather data, build an accurate picture of around the country, so we know what people living with pulmonary fibrosis are going through and what the impact on their life is, because that's sometimes not considered. You know that somebody's got a disease, but you don't realise what's going on in the background in their life. I mean, I lost my career in insurance because of it. I sold for a living, and for 3 years I couldn't speak. And And obviously what we want to do is develop a gold standard for clinicians around the country, so it doesn't become a postcode lottery as it generally is at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. That's been hugely interesting, Andy. Yeah. I mean, I hadn't come across it until it became our charity of the year. So that's really interesting. Thank you very much for all that information. If there's anything so hopefully, I mean, we get a lot of people listening from the property management industry, and lots of companies have, charities of the year and things they do for charity. If you could just kind of say one other thing to the listeners, what would it be?
Support us in our cause and support you in your endeavours. It's a little known disease, and we want it to become a big known disease, so that when people go to their GP and they listen to the lungs, that the GP says this could be pulmonary fibrosis, and immediately then they go on to the healthcare professionals and they follow the national care path that the One Voice ALD has paved the way for.
Excellent. Thanks very much for coming on. Thank you.
My absolute pleasure. Good luck with everything.
Thank you.